Hello, everyone. This is Greg Scorzo. I'm the author and writer and director and music producer of Love Before COVID, the radio play that you heard hopefully a couple of chapters ago. So I'm going to be talking now to the star of this play, one of the two stars, Daniel Ashman, who plays Joe. So it's good to see you, Daniel. Thanks for joining us today.
Absolute pleasure.
So to start with, you told me a couple of days ago that you heard this play finally for the first time in its entirety, from part 1 to part 6. What was your initial reaction when it finished? What did you think?
Yeah, I was absolutely bowled over by it, really, because a sizable time had elapsed from me actually performing in it. It was quite nice to almost relive it and hear it through almost different ears, as it were. That was really good about it. And as a piece, and the production on it, the way the music is used in it, the actual extracted storylines from it, because as you know, with your book, there's actually many more strands of narratives. But what you focused in, I thought there were good choices, and I felt that it was really powerful. It was really powerful. There were times in bit where I was crying. I was relating to my own personal experiences, which I've had recently, and there's something. I think there's something in it for everyone, and it's a very personal, private view of a relationship, and that kind of realism in terms of how people talk to each other. It's uncandid, and I think that's a brave artistic choice as well. And I think that uncandidness everyone can kind of relate to, in kind of how relationships can be really ferocious. They can be really, really, really gutting, and I think artistically often people shy away from that aspect of it. They become more kind of archetypal rather than personal, especially depictions of love in art and stuff like that.
Do you think that we tend to romanticize relationships in films and books and these sorts of things?
Yes. Well, I think it's safer to do. I think it's there's a consumerism about love, and there's obviously romantic ideas about love which give is something to aim for as well, and something to hope for. Yeah. So there's also a spiritual kind of aspect of it, which obviously the characters in your radio play have. They've got their own ideas of love as well, and but it's not often that relationships kind of get explored. So it's either like saying kind of Hollywood films, which is something which we're all kind of familiar with and saturated in. It's normally like a thriller, or an obsessive kind of love where one's chasing the other, or kind of the tragic love of Romeo and Juliet, where they're with each other against all the odds, and then end up, tragically dying, or like Titanic, or like, or you kind of got those kind of big love, big romantic love, but doesn't really kind of explore the love which is filled with imperfection, with fear, with characters bringing with them their experience of love and all of those pains which come with maybe things which aren't love, but we convince ourselves that it is love, because love, like we said, has this romantic connotation with it. So we use love also as an excuse sometimes to accept abuse. We put up with maybe abuse or jealousy, acts of jealousy and anger and everything like that, for the overarching idea of love. Rightly or wrongly, if we look at it without judgment, that's certainly something we do. People see it as in order to love, to be in communion and relationship with someone, you have to make sacrifices. That's also a romantic notion of love, but there's also the opposite as well, isn't there? There's the you do whatever you can to make the other person happy, and when they're happy, you're happy because you're one. So
Yeah.
there's all kinds of variations, I think.
You said something very interesting there, which is it's almost like easier to tell a story with romance in it where like people are getting killed, but the romance is still like presented as an ideal nice thing even if it doesn't happen. Whereas if you tell a story where no one gets killed but the romance is horrible, that brushes people a lot more hard and with a lot more pain than, even with a story where people are getting killed left or right in a crime drama.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely, yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, but that's what makes this very interesting piece of art to me, is that it does its own thing and it doesn't apologize for it, and it really tries to kind of go into moments in their lives where they're really into their psyche. It really kind of like claws out their sense of self-loathing, their experiences as children, the whole piece I'm talking about. I'm not saying, with the kind of the feature-length version of the radio play. I mean, we did the whole thing, didn't we? We recorded the whole thing, and so you do get even a greater rounded sense of these people than what is presented, which is in itself actually much more in depth than than many more films or depictions of romance.
So the book is much more in depth than the 2 hour play, but the play in some ways is more in depth than what you normally see in a regular film, even about a romantic relationship.
Yeah, yeah.
When you heard it, what was your reaction to your character, Joe? What did you think of him when it was over?
I probably had, at the time of doing it, I had more questions about Joe. Like, I was kind of, in my judgment, I mean, maybe I've got a bit older since it's come out and I've become a little bit less judgmental, but I kind of found him initially coming to it. I've kind of found him a bit self-pitying, and I was a bit unsympathetic towards him, to be honest. But, and that was just my own personal reaction to Joe, But listening to it again and seeing that he's clearly in an abusive relationship, the emphasis which I had, even playing Joe, was that the other character, Janet, was the main relationship in his life. But actually, with what was being brought out in this story, is that actually no, they're both as valid as each other and as important as each other. And if anything, the relationship with Lorraine and Joe is more definitive than his relationship with Janet, although that might have set the scene, or the way he approaches his relationship with Lorraine, and the guilt of how he was behaving. And that was one thing which came through, was how he was behaving towards Janet. It echoed in Lorraine towards him in a much more stronger way, because he was in an abusive relationship, although Joe had been, say, abusive in his fear to Janet for the length of time that he was, when he was breaking up with her, which was, in the space of 20 minutes. He then found himself in an extremely abusive relationship for years, in the sense, almost to punish himself. I think you mentioned that before, that, that he doesn't feel he's almost even worthy of the type of happiness that he did initially experience with Janet, almost.
Do you think Joe is a good person, or do you think that there is sort of questionable motives in him? Do you see him as a good guy?
Yeah, I just see him as a human being. I think he's all of those things, is good and bad, really. So I think that his ideas of love are not, they don't marry love. I don't believe that people should suffer endlessly and take abuse, because it then becomes an expression of love, how much abuse you can take from that person, and dedication to that person, and how much you can sacrifice for that person. Because if that person loves you, then they wouldn't want you to do that. You know what I mean? So understanding when you are receiving love, or kind of what are expressions of love, it's quite interesting from the character's point of view, you know. Yeah, is it overused even? You know, the word love or dependency. You know, what's the difference between love and dependency? There's so many interesting strands of thought that came from it and was provoked by listening to it so many years on after recording it. You know,
these plays were actually these dialogues were actually recorded in the end of 2016 and beginning of 2017. But because I was so busy doing other things for the following 3 years, it took me 3 years to assemble them into this 2-hour play with music and editing and sound effects and all that kind of stuff. So you're hearing this 3 years later than you recorded it.
I quite like it for that as well, because at the time, I mean, I thought it was a really interesting piece, like, because I don't really do performing anymore, but I am really interested in like my contemporaries, my friends and acquaintances, as artistic output. Like I will do what I can to facilitate that. We know what the classics are. We know what all, you know, and all of that stuff has been done to death, as it were. But what I do like to hear what the contemporary outpour and the contemporary thoughts on love and everything like that. And this does its own thing, which is very unique, and I think it's a great piece of work actually for it. And I think even I appreciate it even more now than I did back when I first read it. And I thought it was really interesting then as well, now, and even post-COVID times, and with relationships and the nature of them, and the nature of validation, and the need sometimes to even harm yourself, or to harm other people to validate yourself, you know. And all of these things are really uncomfortable things which we don't like to admit that we do. We don't like to in public life, you know. There's a certain presentation that we like to put forward, but you know, but the nitty gritty is not that archetypal romance, which everyone knows anyway who's listening to this, because they'll have their own experiences.
Right. So going back to what you were talking about earlier about Janet, how you saw Janet as sort of the centerpiece romance in Joe's life. Do you think Joe's life would have gone better, let's say, if he never broke up with Janet, if he kind of just accepted that his girlfriend was a psychopath?
I think it would have been different problems, potentially. I think there are, especially with Joe, because you don't really hear too much about his relationship with his mother, but his relationship with his mother is an abusive relationship, and because he can't accept that his mum doesn't love him, and that he doesn't love his mum, he says, well, love extends beyond the disgraceful treatment of the other people. You know, personally, I would disagree with that myself. But sometimes we need to rationalize and tell the story that ultimately, or sometimes I think we mistake the relief of it not being so shit or so so horrible as love, because we're just relieved. And that's one sense which I really had really strongly after when Lorraine and Joe finally started being kind of nice to each other. I mean, they were still slagging each other off, really, but the relentlessness of the attacking, even that different rhythm change, that different intensity, was just like, oh, thank God. Oh, they're actually almost being considerate to each other and nice, you know. And you kind of go, and then you go, oh, that's love, that is. And you go, oh, no, you know, that's just relief. The difference between relief and love, you know.
In the end of the play, when Janet comes back and she says that unconditional love is bad in that speech, did you agree with Janet?
I err towards kind of Janet's kind of, I would say, not view, but her approach to relationships, even though she's a psychopath.
Yeah.
Mainly because, say, one of my primary relationships, which when I was a kid, my parents broke up when I was like 2 or 3 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And then they went on to meet other people who they're still with now, both my parents, and I have siblings from those relationships as well. So I would never take back any of that, or any of those happenings which have come as a result of that initial breakup. So in that sense, they made the right decision.
Right.
If they'd stayed together and they were miserable, then me and my brother wouldn't have had half the experiences, half the people we knew. We wouldn't have necessarily been brought up in a loving environment. It would have been one of tension, one of frustration, one of anger.
Right.
But because they loved us, you see, this is the interesting thing about love and my notion of love. Love isn't about being together in terms of in a relationship. It's about doing what helps nurture the people around you, and that doesn't mean being in a relationship. Sometimes it means walking away. You can still love someone very much, dearly and wholeheartedly, and this is my experience too, but know that to carry on the way you are is damaging them, and you don't want to damage someone if you're in love with them.
Right. So it sounds like, on the whole, even though Janet's a psychopath, you sort of you maybe saw her as one of the more likable characters in the piece.
I just think the way she kind of relates her viewpoint in terms of what is the point of having a relationship if you're not going to have an edifying experience of it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, some people are locked in a relationship. If you're in a parental, what have you, the child doesn't have a choice. And that's the tragedy of the situation. Not only a tragedy, but, it's a recipe for trauma because they're locked in it. Women's rights movements have been about freedom of choice to marry who they choose, not to have arranged marriages and everything
Mm-hmm.
like that, because that can lock them into abusive relationships. And certainly, say, the more kind of, I suppose, working class love, the romantic notion of that idea is that you mutually choose between you, and that's kind of one of the freedoms which we have. We can mutually choose to be here in this point and spend our time together, and that's beautiful when it's not done with coercion, when the benefit is self-evident and it's not about a business deal, or or where you're trying to get two families to align, or or something like that, which is popularly why a lot of, like, especially legal wedding, the legal entity and everything like that was to consolidate power,
Mm-hmm.
and that was devoid of love.
Yeah.
Often, not always. I mean, that's a massive statement, but that was that notion is devoid of love.
Speaking of power, what was your reaction to Lorraine when you heard her in the piece?
Lorraine, I was listening to it with my girlfriend at the time. She was in stitches at first, and then as it was going on, I kind of stopped laughing because actually she's relentless. She's absolutely relentless. Lorraine is. And in her way, she's trying to love, I think. She's trying to be loving to Joe. She's ultimately wanting an outcome where he's healthier.
Yeah.
And has decided to let the gloves come off. And that we pick up in the relationship. So it's almost unfair on Lorraine to an extent, although we also find out that she has been an abusive dick. To Joe as well in the piece. But
he has hit him and burned him.
Yes. I mean, this is it's abuse, and Joe's used to abusive relationships from his mum. Yeah, and gets a wad of violence from Janet, which you'll find out how and why in the actual book.
So what's interesting is Joe and Lorraine have a period in their relationship where Lorraine was drinking, and in that period, she was violent towards Joe.
Yeah.
She burnt cigarettes into the back of his neck. She threw broken glass at him. She scarred him. She threw his laptop out the window. She killed their dog. All sorts of quite nasty things, left permanent damage on his body. But she feels that because she's not doing that anymore and she's not drinking, that in what we hear, she's no longer abusive. Do you agree with
Yeah.
her?
Well, I mean, she's basically trying to shame Joe into behaving how she wants him to behave, which is a form of abuse, especially when it's relentless. I mean, it's interesting, you know, like even that power relationship. You can, when you put it on couples, you kind of go, oh, that's abusive. When you put it on parents, you kind of go, well, the parent needs to teach the child, you know, that there is some kind of grey areas here with that type of tactic. The bottom line is she doesn't have the capacity to embrace and accept Joe for who he is. So then you question, does she love him? How can you love someone that you don't accept?
Yeah. Well, do you think that Lorraine really does love Joe, or do you think she's in the relationship for other reasons?
Yeah, I don't think she does love Joe. I think she sees an opportunity to be with someone who she likes, who will be compliant with her, what she would probably even say are her own failings, although she puts on an outward projection of being super uber confident and whatnot.
So do you think that Lorraine feels that because she's so beautiful that she has kind of a right to behave in a way that ordinary women don't?
Well, yeah. I think there's a. I mean, I don't know what it's like in other countries, but certainly in England, there's this idea: if you work hard on something, then it gives you a moral superiority over everyone else, and your opinion matters more than anyone else. And that works with the amount of effort you put into toning up and exercising and everything like that, as much as it does with your job, you know, and one that there are parallels with that. So yeah. I mean, I would say she does absolutely, but you know, I think she's kind of got the right to destroy people. However, I would put a caveat with this: there is a benevolent side to Lorraine which does come through. She actually wants, in her mind, in her heroic narrative, she wants that for them. She wants that for them so that they're happy with themselves, so that they can go out into the world and they can do whatever they need to do to be happy and everything like that. You know what I mean? That's why there is a benevolent side to Lorraine. You also see the benevolent side when she helps out Joe's friend as well, don't you?
Yeah, who she doesn't like.
Who she doesn't like, but she does it for Joe. So yeah. So there's contradictions within what I've said.
That's really interesting. So do you see Lorraine as the villain of the piece, or do you see her as just a complicated person in a bad situation?
I don't see her as a villain. No, I don't see her as a villain. I think that Joe needs to get the fuck out. And he needs to stay away from her because she's dangerous to him and for him.
How do you think she's dangerous to him?
Well, I mean, ultimately, Joe ends up feeling, and maybe Joe felt this way before anyway, and she's just bringing it out anyway. Joe wants to kill himself. You know, he wants to. He's on the verge of suicide because he feels so disempowered and valueless, and doesn't see the point anymore of anything, of trying. And you know, and I think a lot of people can actually relate to that as well. That sense. It's not necessarily even through abusive relationships that can come from institutional power relationships as well as interpersonal power relationships. If you don't feel like you're valued or that you can change anything or do anything about what's going on, then what's the point, you know?
So if she's his girlfriend, why do you think she can't help him be less suicidal if that's his big problem?
Um, I wouldn't say it is his big problem, but I would say it's where he's driven to, as a result of his big problem is that he doesn't. I suppose Joe's big problem is that his idea of beauty and of love and his what have you is that he ain't going to be able to get anything, you know, aesthetically. He isn't going to be able to get any better than Lorraine. So he's actually suffering from the same vanity that Lorraine is suffering from.
Mm-hmm.
You know, except for he hasn't been able to sustain the outward appearance, but he's still actually very much, in that sense, quite similar to Lorraine. Although he's more open to other people and differences and what have you, and that's maybe because he knows he's not society's Adonis, you know. Or,
Interesting. So would you say these are both two people that value physical beauty way too much?
I mean, to the point that it's damaging, yes, it's too much. To the point that it's damaging for both of them, it's too much. To the point that Joe can't walk away from an abusive relationship, it's too damaging. To the point that Lorraine believes that she can absolutely destroy Joe, it's too much. It's damaging. But there's all many types of vanities. There's intellectual vanity, you know, like as a performer, you know, there's performance vanity. There's many things, and it's essentially the same thing, I think. You know, it all feeds into this idea of who we are and our self-value, and so yeah, it's damaging there. So, like, you know, there's some people who I find personally I find attractive, and I find them attractive for a multitude of reasons and all of their expression. But I might not find someone who I am attracted to in some senses, but not physically. You know, that's natural.
What's interesting is you think Lorraine has a good side, but you also think Lorraine is objectively abusing Joe, right?
Yeah, oh, yeah.
Do you think somebody who is doing what Lorraine is doing should get some sort of like legal punishment?
Oh, that's a good question. Well, yeah. I mean, if it ends in Joe taking his life, then yes, absolutely. Because without that infliction, that circumstance won't come about. Or it might come about, but it won't be. That won't be a cause. That won't be a causation of it. And it's certainly on that level, from what is shown in the play, and what is presented to the audience, it's certainly the instigating factor to his suicidal thought process.
Okay, so if the play weren't a play, if it were an actual recording of Joe and Lorraine,
Yeah.
would you want this to be the sort of recording that could get Lorraine prosecuted?
For myself, personally, I wouldn't go down that route. Personally, for me, if it was someone I loved, it's like a family member, yeah. You know what I mean? So, and this is the problem with that law, I think. The people who are involved love each other, so they don't want to do anything to what's the word? Seemingly or publicly shame the other person. Or do something which is detrimental to them getting a job or what have you, you know, like there's a lasting consequence with the legality thing on participating in work and everything like that. But you know, for when it's someone I care about, I want that to work to get them out of there as a means, you know.
Okay. So here's a different but related question. Suppose that the play was real and it was something that Joe had recorded because he was at the end of his rope and he didn't know what to do, and he put it online and everyone heard the way that she spoke to him. Would you be okay with that, or do you think that would be in some sense violating her privacy?
I'm not a massive fan of, because sometimes the reactions of, and when we've seen this on social media over the years, and we've even discussed a little bit about it on Facebook. I'm not a massive fan of doing that, of people who have very little power.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what I mean, in public life?
Yeah.
And it should kind of be dealt with on the terms of those people who are afflicted and are trying to do something about it. If it needs to, ultimately, if you need to do it to get that person away from you, and
Mm-hmm.
if they're largely the aggressor in the situation and the abuser in that situation, then fuck yeah, okay, all right, do it. But ultimately, you've also got to take responsibility for what that might come back on earth, or
Mm-hmm.
or so there's a sensitivity. Like, how do you? It's an interesting thing about forgiveness, isn't there? And what is an act of justice, and what is remedy and redress for perceived harms and everything? It's a real quite a complex thing.
So if he
If
did
you,
it vindictively, that would be out of order. But if he did it because he felt like it was his only option to get help,
yeah,
that would be okay.
yeah, 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 yeah. I mean, you could question, well, why don't you go to a friend and then get them to someone who you trust? If not everyone has that, but if you do, if you don't, then you've got no fucking choice. But if you go to a friend and then you ask for their take upon it, and that's when they might say, well, you can come and stay at my house,
Right.
and you can come away from this and remove yourself from the situation. We won't say anything to them, so they don't know where you are. That kind of conversation and admitting the truth and the reality of what's going on is really difficult to do, because obviously you end up blaming yourself as well, because you have put yourself in that situation, and but sometimes some things can the water levels can rise without you noticing them, as it were, or the heat gets turned up, and you don't know at what point does it become damaging, what point does the boiling point start to burn you alive,
Yeah.
because that fire in within Lorraine, that fire would have been something he was attracted to initially, because it wasn't turned on him.
Yeah.
It was brutal. It was honest, as far as he could see, and he liked the brutal honesty of her. The fact that she wasn't apologizing for who she was, the fact that she was a doer, and all of these attractive qualities, and then it gets turned on him.
Do you think Lorraine is a sexy woman?
No, not really. It's not. I mean, don't get me wrong. Like who I find attractive. Like, I would say I'm attracted to strong women, and wonderful women. I've got to say that, I suppose. No, I am. But like there are different qualities for me that I'm attracted to. Like, I mean, that that the way she talks about other human beings can be a sickness in itself. Is damaging. It's also ultimately limiting her as well, because she's not able to see the value in people, unless they meet a certain criteria, and that's damaging all round. Because actually everyone's got potentiality. And they're the people I'm attracted to. Is the people that see the potentiality in people and the value in people, and allow people to surprise them, and especially when it comes to bodily issues. I've got a little tale which just snapped me out of it, or whatever remnants I had left, like which I can tell you about if you want.
Sure. If you want to share.
Yeah, well, I was working as a support worker in London with some autistic fellas and lasses, and we used to go to a leisure centre where we'll do rebound therapy, trampolining. And there's one fella who was a support worker as well, and he was quite a big fella, and I tried going on the trampoline, and it was a little bit. I wasn't very dexterous, let's say. He went on it and was graceful, doing flips, doing all sorts of things. And to look at him, you wouldn't think he was capable of doing it.
Mm-hmm.
but actually he was the best in the room. Those little
That could have been Joe.
that could have been Joe. Yes, absolutely. And it's just amazing if you can break through the barriers in your mind through these, or transcend all of those things, and just follow through with the action that you feel you need to do. You can expand way beyond the limit, those limitations and those judgments. And that's what that little thing. It was only a little thing, but it had such. I mean, I knew it anyway intellectually, but
Mm-hmm.
that was when I was forced to confront again and go, yeah,
Yeah.
no, I was absolutely, man, right on. And so
Yeah, you
took a
can't
lot of my
you can't take for granted, because of your skinniness, that you are more athletic than a bigger person.
yeah, or you're more capable, or more clever, or more even sexy, I mean, or any of these things. And and I know a few people in my life like that, who transcend all of that bullshit.
You've said you think Lorraine is abusing Joe. Do you think in the play the abuse only starts during the fight in the bedroom, or do you think she's abusive right from the start when she says, "Take your shirt off"?
She takes the tough love stance, and and if she's genuinely worried about the future, and intending to have a family with him, but doesn't want to be a widow, and you can kind of understand needing to address things. And on a personal level, when you're in a personal relationship, like, if the other person's got an addiction which is becoming problematic, then you have to, that's the person that you should be able to talk to, or should be able to bring up this issue with you. But the way she does it is how you imagine Piers Morgan to deal with it, or Kate, or what's it with Kate? What, not Katie Price? What's it with Kate?
Katie Hopkins.
Kate Hopkins. Do you know what I mean? She's getting amusement out of what she's doing. She's getting a masochistic kind of kick out of it all.
So
I
on the
would
one,
say.
yeah. So on the one hand, she's trying to help him lose weight in those early scenes, but on the other hand, you think she's bullying him to do it.
Yeah. She's getting a kick out of it. She's getting a kick out of it. It's very demonstrative. It's very theatrical. It's very it's like she's got loads of people in her head cheering her on, go, yeah, woo, 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 like Jeremy Kyle is, like, do you know what I mean? She's
Yeah.
putting herself as the defender of all that is moral and that, because she works out a bit.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. So throughout this play, from the beginning to the end, now that it's 3 years have passed, do you still think Joe is self-pitying, or do you see him as now a victim, really?
Yeah, I'm a lot more, as I've got older. It's only been a couple of years, but as I've become a lot more, I suppose, less judgmental myself, I think, in some ways, and I've been kind of more open to the plight, because of people I know in my personal life, of that type of relationship, because it hadn't, up until that point, been something that I'd really experienced myself.
Mm-hmm.
I've been very lucky. I've been very lucky indeed. So within my own personal experience of relationships, because I generally, when things have gone that way, when it's been with friends or something, when it's kind of bordered on abuse, I've just kind of gone, no.
Right.
Not taking it. I don't care. I love you dearly. You're the most important you're one of the most important people in my life, but I'm not taking it, man. and that's when, and hopefully I never do that to someone else. I try not to, but to do both. But yeah, it's fascinating. That's what makes this piece really, really important and really, really interesting, is that although it doesn't go archetypal of, there's a universality of experience which people can relate to it, and that's what makes it really, 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 really good. And I hope, you know, like, like you know, you think like all of these other things got banned for fake, for, you know, whatever you like. You'll be. I wouldn't be surprised if this was to get censored.
No, I mean, I worry
it's
that
brutal.
people will think that this is a kind of like hate speech against women.
Yeah, I mean, well, what was I talking about with Saria? I was talking, you know, with my girlfriend who listened to it with me. We were also writing the play, which is
Yes.
similar, like which deals with trying to keep things the same, even though things are continually changing, and it's on the mother's perspective. And I was just like, are we being too harsh on women here? Are we propagating some of those kind of stereotypes or anything like that? I think if it's a very detailed play, and it's very individualized to those characters. There are aspects of abuse and psychological abuse which happen both ways, and I see no problem with addressing that within the form that it is, you know, with the form which you take, because it is so detailed. It's not saying all women do this. It's not saying all men are victims. It's not saying that. It's saying Joe has this unique set of circumstances, which means that he's a sucker for punishment, and he won't walk away from someone because of his own vanity. Basically, that's why he won't walk away, as I see it, because of his vanity, because and his lack of self-worth and self-value, and he's scared of being on his own, and he, you know, and all of this stuff, and so of course abuse happens to all parties, and in surprising circumstances as well, you know. But of course it happens the opposite way around as well. It would be interesting to maybe role reverse the characters and see what that evokes. You know.
Well, I think what would be interesting about a role reversal is if a man was like Lorraine, he would be very obviously villainous much earlier in the piece. Like, a lot of people are sort of ambivalent about Lorraine until the fight, whereas I don't think you'd have much ambivalence about, say, if she was Larry. Within like the first minute, everybody would get this is a bad guy.
Yeah. Well, there's nil by mouth, isn't there? There's Gary Oldman's nil by mouth, and there, you know, it does deal with physically abusive. Well, where else does it deal with? I mean, this Magnolia as well, with the child-father relationship, the abusive father who's psychologically abusive to who's just after his money.
And there's that movie with Jennifer Lopez where she learns karate to defeat her husband as well.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. But in terms of in-depth thing, I mean, it's hard. It is like, I mean, it was really fluid listening to the actual piece, and I didn't get bored, and it went really quickly, actually, especially the first two episodes. Just like, I couldn't believe they were 20 minutes long. But yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I think it's an interesting study and something to explore about kind of the psychological abuse that people go through and prepare to put. And when does it become abuse? You know, when someone calls you, you dickhead, you know, and some kind of, you know, stop being such a, you know, or you go, that he wouldn't be able to do that, you know, when someone's proposes something, or what have you, you know, like, or she wouldn't, it's not her thing, you know, when the other person's making decisions for that other person, you know, like, like because of their perception of what they think they're capable of, you know.
Yeah. So do you think this play is questioning anything about sort of the nature of love?
Yeah. I mean, I have to think. I think, why are they? Why are they in the same room? You know,
Yeah.
why do they want to spend their time together, the rest of their lives together, especially with Lorraine and Joe? You know, what plan and what idea are they trying to live up to here? I think, and the idea of love. There's love, right? And then there's the idea of love and trying to meet the kind of the publicly accepted expression of love. And I think they're two different things. I think
Right.
one's a social construct, so the other is acceptance. And you know, yeah.
Do you ever meet a couple and you just think, why are you two together? Like why are you even in the same room in real
Yeah,
life?
man. Yeah, well, I mean, it's the reason why people end their relationships. Like why, and it's the reason why, why are we doing this?
Yeah.
Because we don't have to.
I know,
We
right?
don't have to do this, but we choose to. We want to. Why are we? If we're not enjoying, this is not an edifying experience, if we're feeling trapped, if we're feeling what have you, all we do is have to walk out the door. But it's all up here. It's all up in the head.
Yeah.
It's
What's really sad and strange sometimes is you see a couple and you think, oh, they don't like each other. They're fighting in public. They're not going to last, but they wind up lasting their whole lives.
yeah,
And,
yeah.
and yet
I,
you meet this other couple that seem like they're really happy together. Then you find out one day they're divorced and you're like, what happened?
yeah, yeah. It's a strange one. That there is something, I think, to be said about appreciating an emotional honesty. So even if it's flawed, even if it's fucking outrageous, to be able to be free enough to be able to say what you truly think and believe uncensored is a liberation. And to do that in the presence of someone else who isn't going to ostracize you or destroy you is a wonderful thing, and can be. But it can also, like you say, if what you want to say and what you want to express is hurt and pain and anger and frustration all the time, then you kind of end up kind of going, well, look, man, your pain, frustration, anger is in the moment. You can attribute it to all of these things in the past, but it's in the moment that that's happening. So you've got to allow for also the moment's conditionalities to be fed into why you're feeling angry, pained, etc. Why you're being triggered about your past, why you're being, etc., etc.
Yeah. And
So
you can't have an attitude of, well, honesty is just how I show my love.
yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, it I mean, it's interesting because I think I was more willing to experiment. I mean, I try. I don't know how much I can say about my personal life. I probably shouldn't say too much.
Say what you want. Say what you want. It's fine.
I love you. You can say what you want. Yeah. Oh, absolutely. But certainly, I think it's an ideal. It's an ideal of love to be able to reveal your soul, your very essence to a person, and sometimes that's angry and ugly, and sometimes where you would maybe even yourself kind of suppress jealousies in another circumstance, like you would say in a workplace, someone else gets the job or what have you, and you fucked off,
Yeah.
But in a personal relationship, you go, no, you were giving eyes to that person. You were going to, you wanted to have sex with her, didn't you? You wanted to, or whatever it was, or you're cheating on me, ain't you? Whatever it is, you almost go there, and there'd be all the ramifications, but you kind of will be together anyway at the end of it.
Yeah. So, I mean, do you think there's any value in kind of holding back your honesty in a relationship so that you don't sort of come across like Lorraine?
Um, I think suppression ultimately is destructive,
Right.
and can and then it can manifest itself in, you know, in kind of perversions where and like, I don't mean perversions as in, you know, blah, 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 blah. I mean like perversions in as in that's not in essence how you want to express in the world and be, you know. um so if you suppress, like, you know, I mean, you know, sexual suppression is one thing. Like if someone's not feeling like sex, you never have sex or what have you, then you still have the urge to want to have sex. You know, like they won't go away. That type of thing, and then you end up having an affair. You know, that's not because you don't love the other person, because you do love the other person, but you also want to enjoy the sensory bodily experience that is life, you know, as well. You don't want to end up suppressing all of these urges. You don't want to end up, but you don't feel you can say something to the other person because you don't want to pressure them into a position which they don't want to be in, because obviously you're together because you want to be together and you want to be physically expressive with each other too, as well as emotionally, intellectually, and all of the other forms, because it's all one at the end of the day, I think.
Right.
So yeah, it's an interesting, like I say, it's an interesting thing which you can talk about all day, because we're all experts in this field because we're all human, like, you know.
Yeah, we all have relationships. I mean, unless we're a tiny percentage of the population that don't.
Yeah, but even now, you know, I mean, I know people who have who don't have massively physical relationships, you know, but they're still, you know, relating. They still want some forms of intimacy. They still want to be
Still need love.
recognized, and they still need love, and they still want to be recognized and seen. And that's what I think the attraction of say a relationship is that person, if no one else sees you, because we are devalued in public life, you know, we're reduced to numbers, to wages, to all of these things. But if that one person sees you and sees your wonder and your essence and everything like that, then you know what? That's enough. That's more than enough to make all of the other judgments and all the other things which make you feel bad about yourself, yeah, worth it.
So, to wrap this up, what do you hope people get out of this play and your performance in it specifically?
I hope that they forget about my performance in it, and enjoy the meditation that comes after it, the exploration that these characters go through, emotional states. It's important to do, because and it's surprised me, because I don't normally go into the interpersonal. I normally go myself to the public facing, the outward expressions and whatnot, not to the individualized personal relationships. But I think people find it really kind of quite useful and interesting to explore, and to talk to someone afterwards about it as well. I think it's really, really interesting, because it will provoke everyone's ideas of love. Everyone's may even cause you to reflect on your own, the way you've dealt with things and the way you've treated people, and all of that. But as a piece of artwork, and as a piece of as a meditation on the nature of relationships, I think it's uncompromising, and purposefully I mean, they've got their own poetry, each of the characters have, but purposefully a what's the word, it's like a falling fighting angels as they as they crash down to earth. You know, I don't know. It's dramatic as well as being meditative, and I think that, yeah, well done on it, and I'm I'm glad to have been a part of it. I'm really grateful.
Well, thank you so much for being a part of it. You were absolutely amazing, as anyone who's heard it knows. And thanks so much for coming here to talk to me about it today.
Yeah, man, rock on, man. Keep up with the writing, man. Keep it coming. It's really, really interesting. Really good stuff.
So that was Daniel Ashman, who plays Joe. And if you haven't already heard it, check out Love Before COVID, parts 1 through 6, where you can hear Daniel playing Joe and doing this amazing vocal-only performance, which I hope he gets a lot of recognition for, because he deserves it. Oh, and one more thing before I go. I almost forgot. Is this your first starring role?
But it was my first radio play. So yeah. I mean, I don't really act. I don't really perform anymore. So I've done starring roles in theatre, but I mean, you know, but they've normally been our own self-generated content. So it's not, you know, something which I do very often anymore. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you ever want to go back into acting, you certainly have the talent for it.
Thank you. That's very kind. My ego is going to go up. I'm going to end up like Janet.
Or Lorraine.
Oh, Lorraine. That's what I meant. I'm going to end up like Lorraine.
Yeah. Well, you know, we all have to fight our own inner Lorraines.
Yeah, man. Yeah.
So anyways, thanks so much for all this, and I'll see you soon, okay?
Yeah. Much love. Take care.
Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.